Welcome to the 17th edition of my Pug Fireball and Company podcast, where I focus on America's pastime, both past and present. Are you ready to be entertained, informed, and intrigued by stories of memorable players and epic games? I'm your host, Steve, and today we're talking to the new Iowa Cubs broadcaster, Jason Kempf, a native of Johnsburg, Wisconsin. Kempf had 10 years of minor league broadcasting experience before he came to the I-Cubs, including stops in St. Paul, Minnesota, Wichita, Kansas, Dayton, Ohio, the Quad Cities, and Charleston, South Carolina. St. Paul and Wichita were independent teams, which means they weren't affiliated with a major league franchise. He is a product of the radio, TV, film program at the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh. In addition to his minor league baseball experience, he's also called football, basketball, and baseball games for the Citadel and QC Sports Net. His biggest supporters include his wife, Jody, 2-year-old daughter, Quinn, and a new daughter, Harper, which, if I did my calculations right, about 6 weeks old. So good morning, Jason. Where is Johnsburg, Wisconsin?
Good morning, Steve. It's in the middle of nowhere is the best way to say it. But I think the town closest to it that most people would be familiar with is Fond du Lac. It's right on the east shore of Lake Winnebago, which is the big sturgeon spearing area in Wisconsin during the winter. So yeah, it's cornfields, a bar, a church, and a baseball field is basically what Johnsburg is. It gave me a good start on the path to this career.
How big is Johnsburg? A couple hundred people, if that?
Maybe. There's not a single stoplight in town. I would guess if you stretch to the borders on each side, there's probably 100 or 150. I talked to you and a couple other people about this at the Kiwanis meeting a couple of weeks ago. Unless the supper club is busy on a Saturday night, I would say there's probably 150 people there.
Did you play baseball in high school and college?
Just in high school. I did want to play in college, but for whatever reason, I also wanted to commute to school. So I went to the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, as you mentioned. It was about an hour from my house, so playing a sport was kind of going to be tough. So I ended up playing in high school for a long time at a really good program there, and a lot like Iowa, we played summer baseball, so there weren't as many opportunities collegiately scouting-wise. So I ended up coaching the JV team at my high school while I was in college just to kind of stay around the game.
What positions did you play in high school?
I was a pitcher, first base, a little bit of third base as well, and I DH'd occasionally. Unlike the guys who threw all the time, I was the closer my last year of high school, which was great. Everybody else who was on the high school team, I think, had arm issues by the time they were 24, and I was able to avoid that. My arm still feels pretty good.
Good. Glad to hear that. Did you play other sports?
I did. It's like I said, it's small town, so I didn't have to compete with hundreds of kids, but I played football in high school, and I also played basketball. So I kind of love the three main sports, if you will, quote unquote, in the high school time, and was lucky to play a lot in all three.
Guess that's the advantage of a small school. You get to play a lot of different sports, whereas the big schools, you're kind of pegged into one sport, and you kind of have to confine yourself to one sport only. I think the coaches prefer it that way. They get kind of jealous if you're playing other sports.
Yeah, especially nowadays, right? And there's that argument about specialization compared to being an overall good athlete. And when you're in a small town, it doesn't matter. If you're a good athlete, they want you to play every sport. And I know some of my friends did track and field as well, so they did the full year-round. They were in a sport all year. But I was thankful for it, and I think playing all of the different sports helped me be better at each one in different ways.
Why is baseball your favorite sport? I presume it's your favorite since you're a broadcaster.
Yeah. If I had to make a call, I think that would be correct. Now, in the fall, I might say football is my favorite after October, but I think overall baseball is certainly my favorite. I think it has to do with my dad played town ball in Wisconsin every Sunday growing up, so I spent every Sunday at the baseball diamond. And he's only like 5'8", so he didn't play a lot of basketball. He didn't play football. So I think I got it from my dad. And then I just kind of like and I grew up in Wisconsin, so we always had Bob Uecker on the radio. Just going fishing on a Friday night and listening to the Brewers play, or having the radio on while you're driving for an hour, hour and a half at night. I think baseball is a sport that is better for that kind of relaxed listening and viewing than any other sport.
Does Wisconsin have a pretty good history of town baseball? I know Iowa has a pretty long history of town baseball too.
I don't know that it has a huge history. There's a bunch of different leagues. Where I'm from, there were, 10 to 12 teams that played, and they were all small villages like ours. So the cool thing was it was all the people you played as a teammate with in high school then went and played for the little village that they were from. So you'd have people that were 18 that just finished their high school career. And then there were guys like my dad who still played until they were 38 and 40 years old. And it was kind of a unique mix, and you'd have some rivalries because everybody knew everybody. And after the game, everybody would drink together or have dinner together. It was a really interesting time, but I don't know that it had a storied history like Minnesota and Ohio like you talked about.
Do they still have a town baseball team?
They do. My brother, who did not play in high school, he's almost like the mascot, I guess. But he coaches, he does the scorebook. Occasionally, when they can't get enough guys together, he still plays. But those are special occasions. My dad still, bless my mom's heart, she has been at the Ball Diamond there in Johnsburg or wherever they're playing that week every Sunday since, I would imagine, like 1980. So it's been a long time, and they still do it he's kind of the coach, the de facto third base or first base coach every week. And when they come to visit in Des Moines or wherever I am, they always have to leave on Saturday night to get back for the baseball game on Sunday afternoon. So I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
So why did you decide to go to the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh? Well, you said it was because it was close.
Well, that was part of it. Yeah, I think I knew I wanted to broadcast at some point toward the end of my high school career. I was thinking I'm not going to play sports collegiately as much as I would like to. So I wanted to do something that kept me around sports. And then I also wanted to stay relatively close to home to be able to do those things during the summer. So it was Oshkosh had and they still do, a full student-run radio station on campus. The other one that had that was Marquette down in Milwaukee. And I just, being a small-town guy, Milwaukee sounded very large to me at that point. Now, after I've been in baseball for a while, it would have been no problem at all. But Oshkosh was great. It had a number of people who I went to high school with had gone there for a similar program. You had to host a jazz show. You could host a sports talk show if you wanted to. And then the radio station also broadcasted basketball, volleyball, football, baseball. So you had a chance to actually go out and do what you wanted to do before it was time to get a job.
How big of a school is that at Oshkosh? I know the University of Wisconsin is pretty big.
Oshkosh isn't small. I'm trying to think. I'm getting old now, Steve, so it's harder. I think the enrollment is around 10 to 12,000.
Oh, that's much bigger than I thought it was. Okay.
It's a Division III school, but those Division III schools in Wisconsin, they don't have NAIA or Division II schools really. So it's the University of Wisconsin, and then it's Marquette, and then it's those other Division III schools. So the Whitewaters that win a lot of football and baseball titles, Stevens Point and Oshkosh are still pretty big schools.
You took kind of the opposite path of Randy Wayhofer. He was from Chicago, but he went to Miami in broadcasting. Of course, I think he said he kind of liked the beaches and the warm weather too. That was another draw.
I would imagine there are several reasons that you would go to Miami if you were from the Midwest, and I don't know how many of them had to do with school.
Yeah. So how did you get into broadcasting at the professional level?
Like I said, I was in college. I wanted to do it, and actually, this is a funny story, so kind of getting ahead of myself a bit. I had a friend in high school named Chris Miller. He was a grade above me, and he went to Oshkosh in the radio, TV, film program, so I was able to kind of follow in his footsteps in that regard. So he got a job towards the end of his college career with the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers, the single-A baseball team in Appleton, which is the next town over from Oshkosh, and it's the Brewers single-A team. So I talked to him about how do you get into baseball, And so I start to put together some demo tapes and some recordings of my stuff in college and sent them to a bunch of teams. I applied for every number 2 job, which is basically the main broadcaster has an assistant who helps him during the season with game notes and getting on air and calling a few innings. So I reached out to, 5 or 6 different teams. I had an interview with St. Paul, who's now in our league here in Des Moines in AAA, but they were independent, as you mentioned in the open at the time. I interviewed with Dayton. I interviewed with Wichita. I interviewed with Charleston. And funny story, I ended up working for all of those teams in the end. But that year I chose St. Paul because, again, it was a big city, but it was kind of close to home. I think about 4 hours from my parents' front door. And I knew the guy who I interviewed with, Sean Aronson, who's actually still their broadcaster now. When they were here in Des Moines earlier this year, he called his 2000th game with the Saints, which is a pretty cool honor. He just seemed like a guy that was going to help me get to where I wanted to be. And I liked the job description, and it turned out to work out. I accepted his offer, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. Just going to St. Paul and getting started in kind of a unique way in independent baseball and seeing a different side of things.
Was Mike Veck involved with St. Paul then?
Yeah, so Mike Veck and Bill Murray were the co-owners of the team. It was called the Goldklang Group. Marv Goldklang was the primary owner of that, and then Mike and Bill Murray were part of the ownership group. They own Charleston as well and Hudson Valley in New York. So one of my first things that I remember about pro baseball was that I had to take Mike Veck when he came into St. Paul. I had to take him to a TV interview at a studio. And I distinctly remember I had this little burnt orange Cavalier was my car. And Mike was sitting in the passenger seat, and he spilled his coffee all over the floor. So for the next 3 or 4 years, I had a coffee stain from Mike Veck in the passenger seat of my car.
For those who are listening don't know, Mike Veck is the son of Bill Veck, the great Bill Veck, who brought Larry Doby to the major leagues with the Cleveland Indians, Satchel Paige. He was the one who brought it with the St. Louis Browns. It was only like under 4 feet. He walked its only major league at bat. And I think he was replaced by a pitch runner. And Bill Murray, I think that's comedian, isn't it? Bill Murray, the comedian.
Yeah, it makes for a very entertaining day at the office every once in a while when he stops by.
Did they come to many games? Did you get to hang out with them much?
When I was in St. Paul, they did not. But the last 4 years prior to coming to Des Moines, when I was in Charleston, they were around quite a bit. And now Charleston is the only team that they own. So they are there a lot. And I think a lot of people in their retirement don't mind living in Charleston. So it's easier to find those guys around there. But Bill would come by every once in a while and turn the lights off on everybody in the office, or we had a hot stove dinner where we'd get a speaker in every year, and Bill would kind of crash it at the end and grab the microphone and entertain everybody for a few extra minutes. So the interactions were few and far between, I guess is what I was trying to say. But when they were there, it was pretty cool, and everybody was sort of gravitating to those guys.
What was special about your experiences with each of the teams before you came to Des Moines?
In St. Paul, they now have a brand new shiny stadium in downtown. But when I was there, it was the old Midway Stadium. It was concrete. And the one thing I remember there is where I understood that in order to work in baseball, you kind of have to do whatever they want you to do. So one of my jobs as an intern there, and the other 4 or 5 interns, they had, because this was an old kind of concrete only stadium, they had these flower pots and hanging baskets of flowers along the concourse all the way around. So it was my job every other day to go out there with a hose, stretch it all the way down the right field line and water every basket of flowers, and then undo the hose, take it all the way down the third base line and water all the flowers over there. So I distinctly remember that, and it kind of taught me the kind of work that it takes to get to where you want to get to. From there, I went to Wichita, and what really stood out there was their manager, Kevin Hooper, who played in the big leagues for a while with Detroit, and he's now the Atlanta Braves player development director, so he's essentially in charge of the minor leagues for the Braves. The nicest guy that I think I've met in baseball. He's still a good friend. His daughter now plays softball at the University of Minnesota. So I talk to him all the time. And just spending 2 years with him was fantastic. We also won the first championship in team history there. So I got my first championship ring, which when you're a broadcaster, you don't really do anything to earn it, but you're with the team every day. And sometimes you get lucky and the team is really good. So that's what'll always stick out from that year. I went to Dayton after that. They had the longest sellout streak in North American sports, something like their first 8,000 games. So I just remember going to the ballpark every day and every seat was full, and that's a pretty rare experience in minor league baseball, and I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot from my boss there, Tom Nichols. From there, I went to the Quad Cities, not far away. I'm sure a lot of people in Des Moines and around Iowa have been to a game at Modern Woodman Park. What I remember there is it was my first really affiliated experience as the head broadcaster. So just interacting, they were an Astros affiliate at the time, with future big leaguers for the first time in a daily basis. All the guys who were a part of their World Series runs there, they were in Quad Cities at some point for the most part, and I was riding a bus with them. The other thing I remember was the record flooding of the Mississippi River. So that wasn't a good thing, and it knocked us out of the ballpark for a couple of months, but I'll never forget that stretch. And then Charleston, we won 3 straight championships, which, again, they were the first championships the team won in about 100 years. It was 99 years when they won the first one. And we won in 2021, so we got this massive championship ring. They went all out, and then we won again in 22, and they're like, we can't spend the same amount on rings this time. So that was a little bit smaller. And then we won again in 2023 after we were the worst team in the first half, and then we had to get a little bit smaller rings again. So I now have 4, but that run of success with the Rays minor league guys in Charleston is something that I don't know that will ever be matched.
So the moral of the story, I guess, the more championships the team wins, the smaller the ring gets.
Yeah, well, if you win them back to back to back, yeah, there's a budget you got to stay under because you're buying them for a couple hundred people. So it makes it tough on the people who have to open the pocketbook.
Now let's take a break to listen to my other podcasts with such guests as Sam Burnaby and Randy Wayhofer of the Iowa Cubs, and former major leaguers Jim Marshall, Byron Brown, and Rich Nye. Go to my Pug Fireball and Company podcast on YouTube. You can also get my latest book, Pug Fireball and Company, 116 Years of Professional Baseball in Des Moines, Iowa, by going to pugfireballandcompany.com. It's available at several bookstores in central Iowa, too. By the way, the Fall 2024 edition of the Annals of Iowa has a nice review of my latest book. March 19, construction starts on a new ballpark between 4th, 6th, Grand, and Locust Streets in Des Moines. A lot of people probably don't realize there was a ballpark there. It was the second in the team's history. The site was 2.5 blocks north of the city's commercial center. The Hawkeyes beat Sioux City 3-2 in the first game at the new facility on May 5th, 1900. Okay, let's get back with Jason now. How did you move to the Iowa Cubs come about?
So I was in Charleston for the last 5 years, and you mentioned you had talked to previously Alex Cohen with the Iowa Cubs. He was my predecessor in the broadcast booth, and he's now doing great things with the big league team in Chicago on Marquee. So I knew him since I was in Dayton, about 2015, 2016, and we had always stayed in touch. And so Alex had this job since 2017, and I knew that after the season he was moving on and going to take his shot in Chicago, and obviously made a great decision in that regard. And so last year, the 2024 season, I had actually filled in for him when he got to go to St. Louis and make his major league debut in the broadcast booth. So I joined the iCubs in Nashville. Because I was in Charleston, it was a shorter drive for me to get there. I met the team there, called 3 games over the weekend, one with Alex and then the final 2 by myself. And so I got some tape, which is huge in the industry, basically just recordings of yourself calling a game with the Iowa Cubs, doing their advertising reads, so everything sounded like it would if I were the broadcaster here. Throughout the offseason, I had been in touch with Randy Wayhofer, who's my boss and the former broadcaster here. And finally, I think it was early February, maybe late January, they were ready to move forward. Alex was a big help along the way, but I interviewed a couple of times and then got the call, I think, late on a Friday night that I had been chosen to have the job. And being from the Midwest and knowing a lot about the Cubs and the kind of people that live in the state of Iowa and are fans of the Cubs, I was really excited about it. My wife was really excited. As you mentioned, we have a very young daughter right now, so my wife was pregnant and not feeling the best at that point, so a move was tough. But getting about 12 hours closer to home was something that sounded very appealing as well. And it's been everything I could have dreamed of and I thought I would get since I've been here.
Had you ever been to Des Moines before?
I had not. My wife had. When I was in the Quad Cities, she actually was an athletic trainer for the Quad Cities Steamwheelers, the arena football team, and they would come to Des Moines and play the Barnstormers. So she came and was at Wells Fargo for a couple of those games. She also had some athletic training work in the city for various high school events. So she had been here and knew it was a much bigger city than even Davenport and Bettendorf in the Quad Cities. So what she remembered from those weekend trips was very positive, but we've enjoyed it a lot more since we've actually been living here.
As a Milwaukee Brewers fan growing up, is it hard to broadcast games with players who are affiliated with the Chicago Cubs?
Not at all, not at all. The only hard part about it is the people back home who are Brewers fans, literally everybody that I grew up with and know, including my dad and my brother, are Brewers fans. So I get a hard time from them. I think it's very easy to remove yourself from that when you're doing the job. And obviously I want nothing but the best for the guys that I get to see play here every day and get to know a little bit when they make it to the big league level. I don't know that I would have ever said that when I was 15 years old, but now that I'm in my 30s and I've been in professional baseball for a while, who you're working for and where you grow up are kind of 2 different things, and you can separate those a little bit. So I'm very happy that Cade Horton is having success, whether it's against the Brewers or anybody else in Chicago.
And the Chicago Cubs are one of the most iconic franchises in Major League Baseball. They've been around since 1876. What's it feel like to be part of that history?
You can feel it. That's the interesting thing is that, I've worked for minor league teams with Cincinnati, Houston, and Tampa Bay, and they all have their pluses and minuses. But when you work for a team affiliated with the Cubs, there is kind of a different aura and feel. And the number one thing is when we go play on the road, we were just in Omaha, Nebraska. They had 8,000 people there, and you would see 2,000 people wearing Cubs shirts and hats and jerseys. And I don't think you see that with every other minor league team. The other thing is if I have something on social media or a call of a great player or play from one of our top prospects, everybody cares. Cubs fans are looking to see who's coming up in the near future and who's going to be impacting the run to the World Series 5 years down the road. In Charleston with the Rays, that fan base is just so small in comparison to what the Cubs have that it's very refreshing, but it's also pressure-filled a little bit because you have to know what you're talking about and you have to be ready to not make a fool of yourself when you're talking about something that so many people do care about so passionately. It's something I've enjoyed, and it keeps me honest and makes me be the best that I can be because I don't want to fail in a spot where people are paying attention.
Of course, Cincinnati has a long baseball history. In fact, they had the first really professional baseball team. I think they were called the Red Stockings. And there was a guy from Montrose, Iowa, the first Iowan to play professional baseball, Cal McVeigh. He played on the Cincinnati team back in the early 1870s.
That's
so
a good
there's
fact.
a connection there. Do you have any other favorite broadcasters and why? Of course, you mentioned Bob Uecker, so I suppose he was one of your favorites.
Yeah, Uke was always one of my favorites. He's basically on everywhere in the state of Wisconsin from April until September. So he's a guy that you kind of grow up listening to and you feel like you know him even if you've never met him. And I actually, when I was in Quad Cities, we got to play the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers in a game it was Miller Park at the time in Milwaukee. And the Brewers were on the road. Obviously, Bob Uecker wasn't there. But I just remember walking in the press box and seeing his booth, and it just kind of gave you a feeling like, this is really cool. This is a spot where not many people actually get to go. So that was awesome. I also am a big fan of Wayne Larrivee, who is the Green Bay Packers radio broadcaster. He was with the Bears back in the day. And that's one thing that I won't give on no matter where I live. I'm going to be a Packers fan, and I don't care if all the Cubs fans are Bears fans. I'm not going to budge on that one. And so far, history's been in my favor, at least recent history. Those are two of my favorites. I like Kevin Harlan as well, one of the national guys who does football, basketball, everything. And I think Joe Davis, who does the World Series now and is the Dodgers TV broadcaster, is really, really good. And he's a young guy that is going to be doing it at a high level for a long time. So I think those are kind of the ones that pop right into the top of mind for me.
Who do you think is the best baseball announcer at the major league level?
Yeah, that's
TV and radio.
TV, I think Joe Davis is right there. Brian Anderson, who does the Brewers games and is nationally now doing playoff games for TBS, and he does golf and NBA. I think he's really good as well. Obviously, John Shambi has been great for the Cubs and did it for a long time at ESPN and Sunday Night Baseball and those kind of things. So those three are kind of at the top of the list. TV-wise, radio-wise, I really like Tom Hamilton in Cleveland. I think he does a lot of creative things on the air that he's entertaining, that's for sure. I know when they had the brawl a couple years ago where guy slid into second and there was a punch thrown, he started announcing it like a boxing match, and is very quick-witted like that, which I appreciate. So he's one of my favorites in that regard. Radio-wise, it's harder as you work in the industry. You just don't get to watch as many other games anymore because we're playing at 7 o'clock every night, and so are those teams. So I think he's the one that stands out radio-wise. And obviously Pat Hughes, who was Uecker's former partner in Milwaukee and has obviously been kind of that great broadcaster for the Cubs, is right up there as well. And you can listen to him call a game on Friday afternoons while we're playing at night. Those are special times as well.
What is the future of minor league baseball, especially in Des Moines?
That's the question everybody sort of wants to know. Major League Baseball took over minor league baseball during that COVID time period in 2020. So the one thing you know is that starting in 21, everybody signed a 10-year deal with their parent club. So the I-Cubs, I know that for sure, are the AAA affiliate of the Chicago Cubs until at least 2030. I can't imagine there's a reason that would change. I think both sides are very happy with the situation here. But 2030 is sort of the time when everything could go into flux again. The last time Major League Baseball took over, they cut a level of baseball. 40 teams were lost. And so the fear is around minor league baseball, what happens in 2030? Do they try to get rid of another level and all of a sudden we go from 120 teams to 90? Or what is the ultimate goal? I think there's always going to be play because you have to have a place for guys to play before they get to the big leagues and when guys are hurt. There's always going to be some sort of play down at the spring training sites for rehabbers to get healthy and to have access to all the facilities that you have during spring training. But what do you have in between? And I kind of get the sense that Major League Baseball would end up having two affiliates, so Double-A and the big leagues, along with some rookie ball stuff at spring training sites. And what does that mean? I think we all just have to buckle in and wait and see. But the more they pay players and the better the facilities are, it starts pricing them out of having more players and having more facilities. So there's some give and take there. But I'm not nervous at all being here in Des Moines. I had been at a couple of other places I worked because you just didn't know. But I think there's a good thing going here. And you mentioned Sam and Randy, and they obviously have a good plan. And I don't think Des Moines has anything to worry about in the near future.
Isn't Major League Baseball, though, shooting itself in the foot if it reduces the number of minor league teams and baseball being played in cities throughout the U.S.? I mean, it seems counterproductive.
Yeah, to you and I and the regular fan, I think, we are thinking about it logically and we have a romanticism about the game. I don't know that Major League Baseball necessarily understands kind of what goes into those relationships and how important those, even a place that gets 1,000 fans a night, but those 1,000 fans, that's their entire life and the thing they look forward to all year. And I think you saw that, Clinton wasn't drawing very well when they got contracted in 2020, but it was still a place that had a ton of history. And the people who did go to the games cared a lot. It becomes more corporate when it goes to the top level. And so it's all about what's best dollar-wise and how do they most streamline things and make it the best they can for the players. I don't know that there's a ton of regard for the individual communities from that standpoint.
You look back around the 50s, the Dodgers at one time had at least a dozen farm teams, the Yankees. The Cubs, I think, even had maybe 8 or 10 at one time, but no more. So how would you assess the first 2 months of the iCub season?
It's been great. There were a ton of expectations for this group coming into the year because you looked at the various publications that rank prospects by team. And of the top 10 Cubs prospects, we knew that 7 or 8 of those guys were going to be here. And both of those publications, the two that everybody kind of references are Baseball America and MLB Pipeline. They both rank the Iowa Cubs as the most talented team to start 2025. Now, when you have a talented team at AAA, by natural progression, some of those guys are going to make it to Chicago. Some guys are going to get hurt. You know that. So you sit here at the beginning of June, 5 games over 500. They would be right in the playoff race, which is divided between the first half and the second half. So 75 games. After that, the team with the best record qualifies, and then you start all over again for the last 75. But the team in Lehigh Valley is 10 games ahead of the iCubs and everybody else. So the first half is a little bit out of reach, but I think if they play baseball the same way they have so far in the second half, they'll be in the race down to the final weeks in September. Jonathan Long is a prospect who was just outside of the top 10 for the Cubs, but he's second in the league in batting average, 4th in runs batted in. I mean, he's in his first year at Triple, and he's hitting 340. That's not a bad way to really jumpstart your career. The issue for the iCubs has been pitching. When we started the season, you had a rotation that had Cade Horton, who was their top pitching prospect, Jordan Wicks, who had been in the big leagues, Chris Flexen, who spent all of last year in the big leagues with the White Sox, Caleb Killian, who had been a rising prospect in the organization, and Connor Noland, who started on opening night. At this point, from that group, only Connor Noland is still pitching. Chris Flexen and Cade Horton are both in Chicago and have been for quite some time. Jordan Wicks is on the injured list. Caleb Killian is down in Arizona. So the starting pitching has been relatively decimated, and so you have guys bullpen days every other day. The bullpen's been great, but at some point you reach a point where they can't throw any more innings. So depending on how the pitching looks, the Cubs have added a couple of free agents with big league experience that are going to help in that scenario. But the more of those kind of guys we can get, I think the better the team's going to be in the second half. The one thing you have to consider, though, is the Cubs being as good as they are, they're probably going to try to trade for more pieces at the deadline in July to help themselves make a run toward the World Series. And if all the prospects are here and we're the most talented team in minor league baseball, then we're probably going to lose a guy or two as well. So that's something to keep an eye on.
That's what I'm afraid of. I've seen Owen Casey's name and Moises Ballesteros' name quite a bit on the trade rumors.
You just never know. James Triantos has been a little bit banged up this year. He's another big name that's here. And the way Jonathan Long is hitting right now, I don't know that there's been a more impressive player in AAA. So whether he was on teams' radars at the start of the year, I would think at this point he probably is.
What about Ballesteros? Do you think he can catch at the major league level? I see it's pretty divided whether he can or can't.
So here's the thing. Right now, I don't think he's ready to do that. He can hit at a major league level. We've seen that. But I think the indication from the Cubs when Miguel Amaya got hurt, they called up Reese McGuire, a veteran catcher who had been in the big leagues, rather than Moises Ballesteros. And part of that was they needed somebody to catch innings. Now, the good thing is you might say he's not ready now, but he's also 21 years old. So if he was 26, you would say he might never be able to catch at the big league level. But he's 21 and he's working hard at it every day. And I've seen even small advancements from April until now. I think he had a really good series behind the plate in Omaha this week. He caught the tying runner trying to steal second in the ninth inning of one of the games. He's made some really nice plays that there's a chance that he will get to that level in the relatively near future. And the good thing is, having been around him, he has an incredibly positive attitude, and he works hard. And those are the only two things you can ask for when you're trying to improve and get to the end goal that you're looking for.
I've seen him play at first base, but he's not big enough really to be a first baseman.
Yeah, he's not close to 6 feet tall, so that makes it a little bit of a small target over there at first.
And he's too young to be just a everyday DH, I think.
Yeah, and the other part of that is traditionally nowadays the way the game has gone, to be a DH you have to hit 30 home runs or they can find somebody to do that. He's not at this point in time a strictly a home run type of hitter. He's more of an average guy. He's going to hit 330 or 320 for you, but there may not be 20 home runs. So that's kind of the game you have to play if you're the Cubs. Do we have a spot for him to do what he's going to do really well? Or is he maybe more valuable to some other team and we can get a guy that we think is going to help us? That's the game everybody's playing this time of year, and it'll be fun to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Don't forget the Iowa Cubs start a 6-game homestand against the Louisville Bats at Principal Park. The Bats are the AAA affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Jason, for joining me on this podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun talking baseball.